Good day everyone! By the way, I'm Flormi Sugitan Cadiz from BEd 2B. And today, I'm going to discuss with you the oxygen cycle. But before that, let me share with you the objectives of my topic. So by the end of the lesson, the student should be able to A. Define what is oxygen cycle. B. Identify the stages of the oxygen cycle. C. Explain the production and uses of oxygen. And D. Determine how the oxygen cycle takes place. But before we proceed to the discussion, I'd like to share with you the overall content of my lesson. And these are the following. What is oxygen cycle? Stages of the oxygen cycle. Production of oxygen. Uses of oxygen. How the oxygen cycle takes place. Facts about oxygen. And lastly, the importance of oxygen. Where do we find oxygen on Earth? The largest reservoir on Earth's oxygen is found in the lithosphere. Silicate and oxide minerals of the crust and metal make up large portions of the lithospheres and contain oxygen. Why do we need to breathe in and breathe out? Let's dive in and find out. We living things breathe through the process called respiration. That's when oxygen is breathing, the carbon dioxide is breathed out. But mostly we survive because of oxygen. It's the food for our cells. In fact, this gas makes up about 30% of the Earth and about 21% of the air in the Earth's atmosphere. It also makes up about 65% of the mass of human body. But since all of us using it, will it run out eventually? The answer is no. Nature is so good at balancing things, that's why there's a process called oxygen cycle. What exactly is the oxygen cycle? Oxygen is constantly used and created by different processes on planet Earth. All these processes together make up the oxygen cycle. The oxygen cycle is thus a biogeochemical cycle that describes the movement of oxygen within the Earth's three main reservoirs, and these are the lithosphere, which is the land, the hydrosphere, which is the water, and the atmosphere, which is air, which make up the Earth's biosphere. So, oxygen cycle involves the movement of oxygen between biotic, which are the living factors, and abiotic, which are the non-living factors. The oxygen cycle maintains the level of oxygen in our atmosphere. Processes within this cycle are considered either a source of oxygen production or a sink, which involves oxygen consumption. As you can see in the photo presented, oxygen cycle begins with the process of photosynthesis in the presence of sunlight. Releases oxygen back into the atmosphere, which humans and animals breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, and again linking back to the plants. Therefore, oxygen is taken up by plants and animals from the air during respiration. The plants return oxygen to the atmosphere during photosynthesis. This links the oxygen cycle to the carbon cycle. Similarly, whenever we burn any fuel, it is known as combustion, where a substance burns in the presence of oxygen to release energy. Combustion is basically oxidation, where a substance reacts with the oxygen forming oxides. Deforestation is likely to gradually reduce the oxygen levels in our atmosphere. Here are the stages of oxygen cycle. Stage 1. All green plants during the process of photosynthesis release oxygen back into the atmosphere as a byproduct. So, plants release oxygen to the atmosphere as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Stage 2. All aerobic organisms use free oxygen for respiration. So, animals take in oxygen through the process of respiration. Stage 3. Animals exhale carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere, which is again used by the plants during photosynthesis. So, carbon dioxide is released by animals and used in plants in photosynthesis. So, now, oxygen is balanced within the atmosphere. We now know that the oxygen cycle is a process by which oxygen is generated and used. So what are these processes? So oxygen is produced by the following. First, plants. Plants produce oxygen via photosynthesis. Hence, the leading creators of oxygen are plants by the process of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is a biological process by which all green plants synthesize their food in the presence of sunlight. During photosynthesis, plants use sunlight, water, carbon dioxide to create energy, and oxygen gas is liberated as a byproduct of this process. Next one is sunlight. Some oxygen is produced when sunlight reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere. So sunlight also produces oxygen. Some oxygen gas is produced when the sunlight reacts with water vapor in the atmosphere. And now, let's proceed to the uses of oxygen. There are four main processes that use atmospheric oxygen, and these are: first, respiration. All organisms use oxygen for respiration. Example of these are animals and some bacteria, protists, and other organisms that carry out cellular respiration use oxygen in order to create ATP, and they release carbon dioxide. Next one is decomposition. It is one of the natural and most important processes in the oxygen cycle and occurs when an organism dies. Perfect example of this are when plants and animals die, they decompose. This process uses up oxygen and they releases carbon dioxide into the air. Third one is rusting, also called oxidation. This process causes metals to rust, also a process which uses up oxygen. So in this process, metals like iron or alloy rust when they are exposed to mixture and oxygen for an extended period of time, and new compounds of oxide are formed by the combination of the oxygen with the metal. And the last one is combustion. The process by which fire is generated also requires oxygen, along with the heat and fuel. This process also uses up oxygen and they releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So furthermore, it is also one of the most important processes which occur when any of the organic materials, including fossil fuels, plastics, and wood, are burned into the presence of oxygen and releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So how the oxygen cycle takes place? As you can see in the photo presented, during the day, plants take energy from the sun, carbon dioxide from the air, and water from the soil to make their food. Their food is simple glucose. This process is called photosynthesis. Oxygen is released into the air as a byproduct of photosynthesis. While during the night, plants take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide to maintain their metabolism, which is why it is not good idea to sleep under trees at night. So the oxygen that is released by plants is used by humans, animals, and other organisms for respiration, that is breathing. We use oxygen to break down simple sugars and generate energy to sustain ourselves. During respiration, organisms take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide into the air. This carbon dioxide is again taken up by plants for photosynthesis. Thus, we see that our life force is generated chiefly by plants, which is why it's very important to preserve plant life on Earth. And now, I'm going to share with you some interesting facts about oxygen. Did you know that phytoplankton is one of the most significant procedures of oxygen, followed by terrestrial plants and trees? Did you know that oxygen is also produced when the sunlight reacts with water vapor present in the atmosphere? Did you know that a large amount of oxygen is stored in the Earth's crust in the form of oxide, which cannot be used for the respiration process as it is available in the combined state? Before we are going to end this lesson, I'd like to share with you also the importance of oxygen cycle. As we all know, oxygen is the most essential component of the Earth's atmosphere. It is mainly required for breathing, combustion, supporting aquatic life, and also decomposition of organic waste. Oxygen is an important element required for life. However, it can be toxic to some anaerobic bacteria, especially obligate anaerobes. The oxygen cycle is mainly involved in maintaining the level of oxygen in the atmosphere. The entire cycle can be summarized as the oxygen cycle begins with the process of photosynthesis in the presence of sunlight, releases oxygen back into the atmosphere, which humans and animals breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide, and again, linking back to the plants. This also proves that both the oxygen and carbon dioxide, or the carbon cycle rather, occur independently and are interconnected to each other. So that would be all, and I hope you learned something from this video. Thanks for listening.